has been a massive craze for weight loss drugs like Ozempic, Wegovy, or Mounjaro, and it's now led to nationwide shortages for the medication, which was initially meant for individuals with diabetes, but is now being used by individuals looking to lose weight. Now, in response to these shortages, the FDA has permitted pharmaceutical companies to sell essentially off-brand imitations of these treatments, but that has actually opened up a whole host of issues, a Pandora's box of pretty sketchy business practices and also bribes for social media influencers because of course. Now, we'll get to all of that insanity in just a bit, but here's a brief explanation of how these drugs essentially help individuals lose weight. So medications like Ozempic essentially mimic a naturally occurring hormone and slow the emptying of the stomach so that we feel fuller, faster, and for longer. They also target the areas of the brain that regulate appetite, curbing cravings. Sounds like a miracle drug, but there are some issues for individuals who have already started taking it to lose weight. Once they get off the drug, they kind of put the weight back on immediately. There aren't enough studies done in regard to what the impact of drugs like Ozempic are on the human body if you're using it like long term, and you would have to lose it long term if you want to keep the weight off. Now, unfortunately, these drugs have become incredibly popular, and living in Los Angeles, I think that they're being abused, to be quite honest with you. So let's get to the shortage and what the FDA has decided to do in response to the shortage. So the FDA has officially declared shortages for Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro, and the FDA classifies a drug when they classify a drug as in shortage. There are compounding pharmacies that are then permitted to make their own cheaper versions of that drug to essentially close that gap. And so it's very appealing for consumers because oftentimes the compounding pharmacies will concoct a drug that is far cheaper. So in this particular instance, we're talking about the alternative to Ozempic costing about $300 a month versus Ozempic costing $900 a month. And if you're wondering how these pharmacies are getting around the shortages, then you're asking the right questions because the answer is really concerning. So the active ingredient in this drug is something known as semaglutide. That's the key ingredient in both Ozempic and Wegovy. In March of last year, the FDA inspectors accused a compounding pharmacy named Tailor Made of using research approved semaglutide, not patient approved semaglutide. So what does that mean? Well, research approved products are not meant for human consumption. They are not approved by the FDA due to the lack of safety and quality. Now, Tailor Made has denied these allegations, but making matters worse, while compounding pharmacies have to deal with some state and federal regulations, it's not the case with online marketplaces. They don't have similar rules. So Paradigm Peptides until recently offered a small vial of semaglutide, it called the highest quality and potency available for $90, with the caveat that it was not for human consumption. Now, the package contained no instructions, but an automated email from Paradigm highlighted that other buyers of the drug ordered sterile water and a syringe, which would allow the powder to be dissolved and injected. Reached by phone, Paradigm manager Matthew Kawa said the company would remove its weight loss offerings from its website. People are buying them not for the intended purpose we're selling for, he said. Right, okay. And some businesses outright admit to their sketchy business practices. For instance, Peptides of America offers a vial of semaglutide for $350. Those who scroll past the option to buy the vial will find a disclaimer stating that it too is not for human consumption, but its founder, Damon Van, readily acknowledged that his customers are in fact using it to lose weight. In fact, he was quoted in the Washington Post as saying, "It's really great to see some people become the best version of themselves."
Yeah, so look guys, you're not gonna be overly surprised to find out that I consider Ozempic. And it's a tough call, and so a lot of folks struggle with weight, and it's not just an issue of looking better. Sometimes it's an issue of health, and so it's a tough call to make depending on your situation. The doctors are heavily suggesting it, or at least my doctor did. But I am a little worried about long-term effects, and I'm always worried about something you do to your body that's unnatural and the consequences that are gonna flow from that. And this has some reverberating consequences too. And I'm also worried that it's permanent. I mean, so I gotta take this thing the rest of my life? I don't love that either, right? And then when you get into the knockoffs, be careful, and we all want to lose weight. I remember when Jimmy Carter was trying to cure guinea worm disease, but once you cure it, there's no money in it. So that's why nobody was doing it for profit, and Jimmy Carter's foundation had to step in. And I wrote about that in Justice Is Coming Too. And it's a wonderful humanitarian thing to do, but mainly companies look for profit. And in the weight loss business, there's tons of profit, because that's the thing that we're all obsessed with, right? So my general note on this is caution. Be careful. I'm not saying do this or do that. I'm just saying when you're messing with your body, you have to be extraordinarily careful.
And it also doesn't help that social media influencers have become the newest avenue in which companies basically market their products. So if you come across a TikTok video urging you to reach out to a certain pharmacy or reach out to a certain service that's offering an off-brand or knockoff version of Ozempic, just please be careful, because that is currently happening. They're paying influencers to promote these products, and it would be awful for you to, essentially jeopardize your own health in the quest to lose weight. I totally understand how that is alluring to people, how it seduces people, but just be super careful. You shouldn't trust influencers marketing drugs to you, ever.
Yeah, you don't know who's paying them. Look, I'll say one last thing about this. So there's generic drugs that have been tested thoroughly and are sell in places like Canada and other countries. Our drug companies lie to us and say, oh no, those are dangerous. They're not dangerous, okay? On the other hand, new drugs and knockoff of new drugs that haven't even been tested long enough, let alone the knockoffs, don't do it. There are things that are actually dangerous, and when you hear a lot of buzz about it, that's when you should be the most careful, not the least careful, especially these days with everybody getting paid to push BS, right? Totally. So I would say don't do the knockoffs. They're not at all tested enough. Do not mess with your body to that degree.
Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.